And I was kind of bored of my corporate engineering job, and started teaching kids racing drones after school and in the summer.
Welcome to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast, where we explore the ins and outs of the seven figure journey. I'm David Gilliland, one of your hosts. We are excited today to have Dave Conelias with us out of Connecticut. Dave, welcome.
Thanks so much, Dave.
And sorry, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your business and how you got started before we jump into the rest of this?
Sure. Yeah, the short history is I was an engineer, working, corporate engineering at a big employer in Connecticut, and I'd worked at some small companies, but that was my first employer out of college. Then I left and came back, and I was on a big aerospace program. If anyone knows Connecticut, there's a few companies up here that do that kind of stuff. And I was kind of bored of my corporate engineering job, and started teaching kids racing drones after school and in the summer, and flight simulators. So just something I was doing, interested in, and this was 8 years ago. So racing drones was pretty new, like it wasn't really this mainstream thing yet. And then teachers started seeing what we were doing. They loved it. We were there. Kids had technology education in school, but it was kind of really theoretical based, really for the high level student that wants to do the crazy math equations, or it was auto shop. And there wasn't really something in the middle with the new technology. So we saw that teachers asked us to build them curriculum. We didn't know what that was, right? We were engineers. And then so we brought on an educator, and then we started to see that a better way to do this was not teach ourselves, even though we still do some of that, but to train the teachers, provide the curriculum, and provide the equipment for everything from drones to robotics to engineering to software. And our newest ones are AI and cybersecurity. So we just look at all the new age tech and help schools teach that to students.
Very cool. And it's Milestone C is the name of the business. You
Yes.
guys, you guys have been, making a difference out there, and to step in and say, "Hey, we're helping schools do a little thing," and to build a seven-figure business doing that is pretty impressive. Uh,
Thank you.
did, what are some of the lessons you've learned now that you're, not like the first class you were doing stuff, but you're down the path quite a ways. What have you learned? Maybe some nuggets you could share with us.
Um, so I think do your research on a market ahead of time. One of our big headaches is our sales cycle is a year plus, right? Schools buy things about once a year. So what that drives us crazy with is I can't try things quickly and figure out if it works. So if we do a new marketing campaign and have a new product, might land, I'll find out in a year and a half, right? So that's a bit. So what I mean is that's a major problem in this industry. Now that's how it works, right? There's nothing you can do, but where that becomes a big pain is I'll spend 30, 40 grand on a thing, on a conferences, and do this. I don't find out if it works for like a year and a half, if not more. So that's one of my biggest headaches. So when I say do the research on the market, like you want to figure out something works in 3 months, this is the wrong market for that. So that drove me a little bit crazy. And then I think it's find a good team. That's my least favorite part is hiring of all of this. Is find a good team, find good people, treat them well, pay them pay them well so they stay if they're good at what they do, because that is very difficult. You're only as good as your team. So I think
Yeah,
those are my two nuggets. And
yeah.
on the research side, I looked at a few other businesses to start. One was beer brewing. I thought that was at the height in 2012. I was wrong, right? I was way off. But like that one is an example. You want to grow in the beer industry, you got to sink all your money into stainless steel. So now you just have this massive overhead of just all your cash is stuck in steel. I didn't like that about that business, right? So I why I like this one was there is no $1 million machine. It's our brains, and we train people, and we pass the equipment on to schools, and there is no $1 million thing I got to build or buy or do. So that was why I really liked this kind of business.
That's cool. Let's play a little bit in the do your research. Now, I know you said if you want to move fast, you can't in this space, but what have you done that helps you understand your market sooner and faster, even though the buying cycle is so slow?
So I find it's a little bit of look for patterns. So if somebody says to me like the one of our products we brought online this last summer, so over this past summer, so we built it in the spring. was more middle school programs that were lighter on the equipment buy. So you think a middle school, they have sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. They want every student to do the same thing. That means $30,000 of robots, right? They can't pay for that. So we brought on programs that didn't have this big equipment side to it, right? Things they already had, or it's all screen based. And there's pros and cons to that. But I where that came from is in 3 or 4 meetings over last fall, I heard people, no, I can't buy it, too expensive, right? In middle school, and I saw that world changing a little bit. But the problem is it's only 2 or 3 times. So kind of looking for those nuggets and, registering them in your brain. And then when you hear it again and again, you go, "Oh, I'm listening to that now." So I think it's, talking with your customers, really getting to know them. So I try to go in person as efficient as online meetings are. I try to go in person, spend a whole hour, even though that cost me 3 hours of my day driving there and getting back. I think that's really listening to the market in whatever way you can, is huge. And it's really difficult because it's just noise, right? And you got to kind of sift through that.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's really helped us.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think that, I mean, that connects well with, I don't know if you've heard of the lean startup methodology.
Hmm.
Um, the idea of what are your, basically your 100 interviews, are you going out and talking and showing people, here's what it looks like, here's the kinds of things, and looking not for people to say, oh, that's a good idea, because that means it's garbage, but rather where they kind of are caught off guard, like, wow, really, you can do that, right? Wow, really?
Yeah.
Right. And then the other data for you especially is, uh, where's that price point? Where's the price point that they're like, we're jumping on this, versus, whoa, that's going to have to go to committee forever, that's going to be blah blah blah, that scares them away.
Yeah, that's big. What I mean, some of the other things that I saw is we originally started out as that after school program I described, and that's what we were doing for a little while because we still had our corporate jobs. That's not a very scalable model. You got to be somewhere on Tuesday, somewhere on Wednesday, and you can make money doing it, but it's a grind, right? And you got
Yeah.
to got to have somebody booked for every day of the week, and that's a difficult. It's difficult to recruit kids. They're doing sports, they're doing other stuff. So even though that's where we started, we saw like this is not the best way to go about this. So training teachers is a much more sustainable model. Problem is you run into that year-long sales cycle. So there's pros and cons to all of it, but it's yeah. So we pivoted a few times, and we're actually in one of those pivots now. Where we're kind of scratching our head about what's in 5 years.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, let's dive just a little deeper into your other little nugget, which was the hiring. How
Yeah.
what things have helped? So, like, the value equation, first off, for why hiring the right people matters. um, who cares? Can't you just get someone else? I mean, the important thing is what the market will buy. And you're saying no. This is something that's a make or break it for my business.
I think there's a couple of key ones there. So if you're a big corporation, you can hire somebody that's a 60% fit and they're probably fine, right? Like you'll move them to a different project or something. They don't have to be best friends with everybody. They don't have to get along, right? So, but in a small business, not only are you wearing multiple hats, right? Everybody has more than one job, but you also, there's 8 of you. You got to get along, right? And there's no hiding that. So, I think the hard part for small businesses are you got to get along on the personal side, on the work side, and there's just a lot to do. There is no useless meetings that you go to for half a day, and it's like, I lived that world where I counted the hours. Some weeks it'd be 25 hours of meetings, and I'm like, this sucks. Like, there's no way this is beneficial. But that's the corporate world, right? You got to be in those meetings so you can communicate down to your team and blah blah blah. Here we have one 40-minute meeting where we all sit there and just kind of do the highlights. Everything else is on demand. So the hiring thing where I struggle with is I want that good person, and I get like 2.5 hours to figure out if they're the person in a resume. Like none of that works. So,
Yeah,
we've developed our process a little bit. First one is friends of friends is the best in my opinion, or someone that you know. So for us, it'd be like if I'm hiring another educator, I know dozens of educators. I know I've worked with them, or my team has worked with them. So finding somebody that's a known entity And then we developed our process of we do kind of the standard first interview, standard second interview for the couple of people we like, but it takes 4 or 5 months to like put out the posting and do so it's just miserable on your time. Like I end up doing it at night so I don't mess up my days. But then the third interview, if we're really going to hire somebody, is we go to a happy hour. It's beers with Dave, right? And because that part we haven't tested yet. And if you can't talk to me having a beer, and it could be, could be food and beers, whatever it is, but it's out of the workplace. It could be a lunch, right? If we can't arrange it after work. The point is we got to get along, right? And not everything's going to be fun, and we're going to screw up. So I'm going to be, pissed one day, and if you can't deal with that, like then that personal side has to fit too, and that's the hard part in the interview process. The work side, most people can kind of do the work. Can they move as fast as we need them? That's a question. And then can they fit on the personal side?
All right, so we're going to take beers with Dave as the nugget for this one.
Yeah,
Um, Basically, if that's the way your team hangs out, can they hang with us? Because these relationships are, I mean, we're working all sorts of hours at different times, different things. And that's what works for you. That's cool.
yeah,
Um, well, let's kind of switch and go to another little level, another piece. Tell me, what are you working on? I mean, you hinted at it. I mean, you were saying now we're looking at another pivot, maybe like 5 years out. What do we need to do? I mean, talk more. Talk more about what your need is now.
sure. So if you asked me 2 years ago, what are you going to be doing in 5 years? I was pretty set. It's classroom programs for students and teachers and training them, and they need it, and it's super important. And all that's still true. However, in 5 years, we have a couple things that came online. So you have AI came online, which means like the large language models, which now teachers are a competition source for us because they can write their own curriculum in about a month instead of never, right? Using large language models as a curriculum developing tool. That's how we do that. And now teachers, their school will pay them and they build a course over a summer. Now they don't need to buy it from us. So if they have some expertise, let's say in robotics, they could easily build their own drone course, right? So that's one new competition. Two is there's a big conference called ISTE. It's one of the biggest tech education conferences around. It was in Denver this last year, and Philly the year before. The year before, it was all over the place, right? The companies were all over the place. It was kind of your typical Lego has a giant thing because they're big in this world. This year, it was drastically different. Google, Microsoft ruled the whole thing. That entire hallways. So that what I'm seeing there is, and you saw it with Chromebooks, you saw it with some other technology, is the big boys are starting to play in this world. So that's interesting. Now, I can do things they can't, like teacher training, things like that, where we're very personal. But am I going to make a better coding curriculum than Google? Uh, I think it's great, right? Our curriculum is great, but when you start seeing that, what it means is just consolidation of the market. So either integrate with them, which we're working on, right? We integrate with their technology, but can you partner with them in some way or do things they can't do? So in 5 years, I don't know that I want to be a curriculum company rivaling Google, right? If they go hard into this space. So and Amazon's in there as well. So it's basically, Amazon, Google, Microsoft had their own booths, had their own AI booth separately, and then they're on every third booth, like our partner Microsoft, our partner Google. So it's really wild to see the difference in just a year. So that's impacting it. And then you have teacher shortages are wild. All the education budget, the government dumped a bunch of money on education, that all dried up, and that'll rebound. That's fine. We can deal with that. But it's just interesting to see the big boys starting to play in this area, the teacher shortages, AI coming online. That's interesting to watch and figure out. Okay, what are you going to do in 5 years? Start leaning that way. And what we're seeing is that one of the new things we didn't know we'd be doing is training that's not associated with our curriculum. So let's teach all the teachers about AI. That's just a new thing we just started getting asked about. So in some ways, that may be what we end up doing. The headache there is we're not built for that. That's a staff heavy thing. You're cruising around training everybody. So now do I have to start changing our staffing to be more on the training side than on the curriculum side? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm playing with now.
Well, I mean the issue we're talking about is how do I build an organization, a team that can respond to a changing future? So the details you shared are merely the current context.
Yep.
5 years from now, you're going to be looking again. 5 years ahead. My
I need
goodness,
my
everything's shifting. Everything's changing. What do we do, right? And and
I need
so
yeah, I need
like
my crystal ball. Yeah.
that's
Do
right.
you need
That's
the
right.
like
Let's build the crystal ball into the business then, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea we're looking at is um, if you've hired the right people, and if your group shares a vision of where they want to go, and I don't mean the customer value proposition, I mean they all agree we want to go have this kind of impact of some sort, right? We
sure.
want to go do something cool together. We all agree we're doing something cool together. Now, how do we position ourselves to be winners in the market?
Yeah.
Uh, you mentioned you do a 40-minute meeting, and that's all you've got on there. Can I delve a little more? Do you have a strategic planning meeting with your team every year, every quarter?
Not every quarter. I will tell them what's on my mind. Yeah, our team meeting is every Wednesday for like 45 minutes, and I give them the highlights on like what's going on in sales, who's on their projects. We look at our Gantt chart, make sure we're not forgetting something, and then very quick. Sometimes we'll do that longer Gantt chart meeting separately. And then, yeah, once a year, I'm pretty transparent. They know our financials, like they see our P and L and everything. And then we do strategy in December usually. Now, I'll revisit it every quarter, and I'll be like, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that. So I'll talk to them about it, just ideas. But then it's usually in December we'll sit down and just have that, like, here's what we're looking to do. Here's our next 6 months, 8 months, couple of years, and that'll change, and they all know that, but it's at least that we have a solid plan of what we're going to do. Like when I described that middle school program, they knew that was coming, right? What are we building this fall? We know what we're doing. Little unclear what we're doing in the spring, right? That's when I start figuring out right now, what's our background work next spring. Is there anything, or is it tons of sales, and we start focusing there, like what depends what we're up to.
Yeah. Uh, well, here's something that may be useful and maybe
Sure.
not as you look at it, because I mean, solving this problem means viability into the future, right? It
Hmm.
means business exists or it doesn't. We go under, or we are mediocre, or we take off. Like solving this matters, right? Um, but it's nothing that gets the attention that it needs on the daily. It kind of gets looked at. I mean, you're thinking about it, but the rest of the team's just operating, right? They're all
Yep.
delivering. So here's something that we've seen that's helped businesses in multiple industries is first, I can't be the one, it can't just be Dave who's the smart guy thinking about the future. I need to figure out how do I get all of my team with their antennas up, paying attention to what the shifts are. Because like you go into a place and you go and you listen to your customers, when they're out there, are they learning to listen? Are they learning to pay attention? And then not just the customers, are they reading things? Are they following the shifts of where the industry's moving? So are they paying attention to that sort of stuff? And so I'll use a rhythm like this on a quarterly basis. For most businesses, that's enough. Is that you stop and you say, okay, what is happening? And go through a very simple SWOT analysis, and you can have your team come prepared. So a SWOT analysis internally, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? Great. Externally, what opportunities and threats? And where that data comes from, I don't want it to just be top of mind. Maybe your first meeting, they share top of mind stuff. But after that, we start asking them to really learn something. Like, hey, I need you to really get into and see what's the direction, what's the kind of stuff that Microsoft, Google, what are they throwing at this, and I want to know. I want you talking with those people that have them as their partner. What are their end goals? Where are their incentives aligning right now? What are you selling? Where's this supposed to go to? What are the quotas? So you start seeing the direction these big boys are playing, or what are in the journals, the articles, what are they talking about, just so that your team is starting to see at a little higher level. Then they bring that together, and we really list up on the board all the opportunities and threats we could think of and any data that's behind that.
I think that's great. I think, some of my team does that naturally. Like, I'm not our tech guru, right? Our
That's
tech
awesome.
guru, because
Yeah.
and we get some of this for free, what you're mentioning, because we have to look at what industry's doing to build that into our course. So, we get some of that for free, but I think there are some folks that I could coach them up on actually, like, purposely looking for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and they're all sharp, and they know what I'm interested in, so, like, half my emails are just like the newsletter from whoever, and I just skim it, skim it, skim it, and you start to see the trends. So we're pretty good about that. But I'm not at right. I'm a little bit of a misfit. I'm not an educator by trade. So my education folks, like, they are like, hey, did you see this thing? This is important, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
That's
So they're
that
pretty
goes
good.
back to the hiring. The hiring wasn't just someone who could do their job. It's someone who really cares about the stuff, right? We all want to go have this impact, and they care because what are they reading in their spare time? It
Yep,
wasn't some romance novel or some how to get the cheat code on this game. They're reading about industry stuff because they care
yep,
about it, right? And ancillary or extended industry, like the customers industry, right? They're thinking about those things. Bringing that together on a quarterly basis, it doesn't mean it's shifting big time, but you should go through it all and watch what did change from last quarter to this quarter, and which of these things would have a bigger win for us or could potentially undermine what we're doing. So just having that and then having the discussion as a group. Okay, now we see our strengths and weaknesses. We're seeing true opportunities, true threats out there, and the imminence of them. Like, these people are moving fast. We think they may have stuff going in 2 years, or 6 months or whatever. Looking at that, then the team will ask a critical question in here is, okay, so how do we capitalize on this opportunity given these weaknesses and strengths that we have? Or how do we defend against this threat given these strengths or weaknesses that we have?
yep,
Right? Asking these questions. And now each of your team members on their own will identify three, four, five key strategic questions. Those are strategic questions, right? Like, we're thinking 5 years down the road here. We're thinking big picture. How do we, given these? Um, Now, with that listing, now you've got a whole bunch of these questions, right? And some of them are going to come together. You start to see where your team's thinking, where they see the highest priorities, and let's rank them out. Let's vote this out. Let's see what's most important and identify one and say, okay, let's win. Now, this particular one, when you're saying 5 years down the road, I'd probably take a day, not 40 minutes. I'd take a day. And
for
and
sure.
I
Yeah, these are not short
these are not
conversations. Yeah,
short conversations. We're
yeah,
taking a day to really see who we are, where we're at, what we're missing, what we need. So if this is the future target, given what's there, we think we've got to play in this space. We don't have this talent or this talent. We are underutilizing this system we have, right? And we're like, okay, here's strengths we need to build, here's strengths we need to develop or to leverage. Now let's go for it. Now we've got plans that each quarter we can just do little tweaks. Here's what's shifting. Oh, this we may need to tweak this just a little bit, right? Market's moved a little bit. Let's keep tweaking, but it's more in line with that 5 year vision. And you're probably the one thinking more on, do we have to change the 5 year vision yet or not? But you've got
yeah,
great
exactly.
data from your team co-creating what they believe the win is in the future.
Oh, I like that. And we actually play a game of, since we do have that long sales cycle, you're making me think of, like, we will market things and not even have it built yet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because and we go, did that land? Oh, I guess we got to build that thing. And some of that is, that's, I stress out my team sometimes. I'm like, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll build it later if it sells. But part of that is because, let's say they buy it in December, they're not going to use it till September. So we have
You've
that
got
year
time.
cycle has a
You've got
pro.
you've
Yeah,
got the talent, and that's that interview thing. The wow, when people are saying wow, that's when they're pulling out the money. When they
yeah,
pull out the money, you've got something real happening, right? So yeah, sell
yeah,
it and then build it. I'm fully on board with that. When you got time to build it still. So
yep,
I love that. Sell the idea, think about it, and you can even sell the big boys in some of these. It could be one of the strengths you need to build is a tight partnership with Google, in this
Right.
area, right? We've got to nail this. We've got to get the inside person. Who's that role that's going to make the difference? Once we built that, let's go build the relationship and let's sell them on. Look, you guys can build lots of stuff really fast, but we know educators in the middle school space. Do you? Right? They don't. They know how to sell equipment to them, but they don't do the rest of it. They may not even know the buying process, right? So there's a spot for you. All right. Was that useful? Um, what we shared, or do you need
It
more
is
from
for
this?
our I think for our junior folks, that's, something I should definitely coach them up on, right? And especially because 'cause they're, not everybody had the same background I did where, like, this kind of stuff was beat into you, like, you had to do them in a big meeting and you figure it out. So and we saw that anytime we hire an educator, we are always having to train them on some things that are just given in the corporate world,
Yeah.
right? Because they didn't come from that world. So it's very, I think some of the junior folks, I can definitely train them up on that.
Train them up on it, and then build the
Yeah.
time and space where one of the ways in the training is just to kind of leaders hold back. If the rest of you already know, step back, pull from them their ideas first,
Yep.
really pull it out, and then augment a little bit. Like,
That's something I learned probably like 5, 6, 7 years ago, like later in my I was like, "Oh, don't be the first one to talk." Like, because 'cause I'll dominate a conversation. So, yeah,
yeah.
had
Well,
to figure that out
fantastic.
later.
Dave, anything else you want to dive into, or was this enough to help you take a step forward on where do we go, or way to build this agility for 5 years down the road, pivoting?
No, I think, this was great. I mean, I think there's an interesting our big question is, what do you do with those big boys? Because that's a newer phenomenon. Like, so one of the things that I'm scratching my head on is how do you David and Goliath this? How do you partner with them or do something they can't do, when they have so much resource, they have so much dominance. So that's a new world for us. So we're poking at that.
Almost all of them. Well, Google kind of plays its own little thing right now, but here's a Microsoft game. They use VARs. It's value added resellers for just
Yep,
about everything. They actually don't get out there and sell their stuff. So
absolutely.
you're perfectly positioned to enter into a spot in the market that their other VARs are just not prepared to do.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah,
approaching them, they have whole organization system built around that. And I bet Google will have some similar types of things where the partnership of we are the ones who know the customers, who know how to integrate things, who know how to care for those needs. You guys, you want to build all the stuff? Great. We, but we're the ones that everybody knows. And so we take half of it, you take half of it, and we work together just fine.
yeah. So that's what we're playing with is how to push into that the right way, right? Like, how do you really do that, and then go do something they can't do, like consulting or training, things like that. So,
That's right.
yeah, that's what
That's
we're
that's
playing
the
with.
stuff that they're not staffed to do that kind of work, not organized
Yeah,
that way. I think that's a great way. Little tips on some of those. You can just go and talk with current ones who represent them in
yep,
other ways. For instance, enterprise level software VARs. Talk with them. Say, well, how's it work? Who are the connections? Can you introduce
yeah,
me? And I think they'll get you into the right places to learn the education division.
yeah. That's great.
Cool. All right. Well, let's end with that. Dave, thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, or maybe some of the other people listening on here wish their schools were using what you've got, how do they tap into your genius?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. I'm happy to always chat. My email's dave@milestonec.com, right? Super simple, DAVE. And I'm happy to discuss any of this stuff. I do some of the, entrepreneurship groups in our local area that I was a part of, and now I think I'm one of the mentors on, which I didn't even know when that happened. But yeah, so I think these small conversations are great. So I'm happy to have it with anybody and do some coaching or get coached. Like, I'm pretty humble with this. Like, I don't know what I don't know. So, the best part, one of the most fun things I hear is sales is super hard with schools. It's the only sales I know. So I'm kind of either dumb enough to do it or I guess stubborn enough. But when I said what I don't know is I didn't know sales with schools was hard. That's just what I learned. So kind of the mindset is just keep moving forward.
Very cool. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. For you listeners out there, if you found some value, if you found some nuggets that helped you and you think could help others, please like, share, get it to other seven-figure business owners so they too can benefit from the learnings that Dave shared with us today and some of the things we talked about together. Um, keep growing, keep striving, keep building, and until next time.